As the country was commemorating the Peace Memorial Day on February 28, the indigenous people held a nationwide smoke-setting event to demand justice. They say the government has not formally apologized for the oppression and cultural repression imposed on the indigenous people in the past. Some 40 indigenous communities and civic groups all over Taiwan sent smoke signals and urged the authorities and public to pay more attention to the plight of the indigenous people. Thirteen indigenous communities across Taiwan chose Peace Memorial Day to set off smoke signals simultaneously. They were making the point that peace has not arrived for the indigenous people.
We must make a strong point to the so-called governing powers. In the past 300 years, you had arrived on this land at different times. But no matter who you are, you must remember that the natural sovereignty belongs to us. We set off smoke signals to declare to gods and ancestors' spirits our determination to reclaim the stolen traditional territories and regain our natural sovereignty.
In the past, indigenous members burned pieces of wood to send smoke signals in communication with other communities. On February 28, some 40 indigenous communities and civic groups set off smoke in hopes of drawing people's attention to the difficulties that the locals face. The indigenous people wanted to have their voices heard in the nationwide event.
Pag naisasabi mo ka, inazam sa isat, pag-ahano ka inazam. Kakilway sabi, Wawa Tudi! Wawa Tudi! Tudi 归还给原住民!
Today in this event, we have 4 points to make. We call on the government to first return to indigenous people their traditional land, second, to establish indigenous autonomous regions, and third, to enact Taiwanese indigenous people's constitution. And lastly, we Zhou Group oppose having nuclear waste disposal sites on our traditional territories.
Ini sayang ni may hakukila palangun ni longdan ta ita sukan niks ka yama pukila sa ni na may hinido iya mapasamat nisa puso bala siyang ita may hakukila sehota ni ta hakukila ko kata sayang yami truko ni na may biyak ba de payo sun zu chi na hang nat ita na kilawak ka seho payo ta saw ni ket sayang.
People near the mountains rely on the mountains for their livelihood. The ocean is the mother of the Amis people. We rely on the ocean. The ocean is the origin of our Amis culture. But now we are forbidden to fish in the sea. The corporations and some people are destroying the ocean, but they place all the blame on the indigenous people. Well, we don't buy that.
今天是228的纪念日。
Today is the Peace Memorial Day, but the indigenous people have not yet received any apology from the so-called rulers, the alien governments that immigrated here. That's why we want to remind the government to enforce the indigenous people's basic law and set indigenous autonomous regions. The policies should be implemented. We are sending smoke signals to get this message across and to express a strong dissatisfaction.
The indigenous people chose the Peace Memorial Day to voice their discontent to the current government and their demand for an official apology for the oppression and unfair treatment they had suffered in the past decades. Across Taiwan, indigenous members gathered to set off smoke signals, hoping to raise public awareness on indigenous issues. TITV Weekly.